Steve Bowers, welcome you to Dialogue here at E+ TV6 and a conversation with David Kustoff, who is the Congressman for the 8th District in the state of Tennessee. In how many terms now?
Well, this is my 5th term.
5th term, okay.
I was elected in 2016. I came in with President Trump, and it's been an adventure. It's also been a real honor to be able to be people's voice in Washington from West Tennessee.
So you've been riding on both sides here from Trump to Biden, now back to Trump.
Trump's more fun.
Okay. At least for you, I guess it is, right? At least for you. It's amazing. The 8th District has changed a lot. When I first got in this business decades ago, the 7th and 8th kind of split West Tennessee, one south and one north. And now it's pretty much configured where as far as rural West Tennessee, you've got most all of it, except maybe the counties along the river, I think.
Right. Well, so we represent 20 counties in West Tennessee. And to your point, things have changed with redistricting over the years. The 8th District is a great district. And, you know, you think about rural West Tennessee, talk about the parts of Shelby County that I get to represent, but we are the largest ag district here in the 8th Congressional District in West Tennessee in the entire state. And I take a lot of pride in that.
Well, it's great. And it's much more cohesive this way, too, I think, splitting.
It is.
I remember when Van Hillary started in Hardin County, went all the way to Virginia, one county wide or something. We've had some bad configurations. This makes a lot more sense.
It does.
It does. We're much more cohesive.
Now, I'm in a car a lot, as you could imagine.
Well, yeah, I can imagine. But at least you're not having to cross the river.
No.
Right? And so that has made a big difference, I think, in the consistency of representation, because there are a lot more similarities here, I think, than when you start crossing the river, it gets into a different world. And I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
I know we're in the midst, we have some specific things we want to talk about. In the midst, I guess in a sense, budget talks seem to go on all the time now. We don't do budgets the way I guess they should be done. Where we have budget, we do continuing resolutions and governmental shutdown threats and all other kind of things. We've had the big bill. Where are we standing in all this right now?
So we're working on what President Trump calls the one big beautiful bill.
Okay.
So I'll say this to you and everybody watching. In my opinion, once we get this done, it will be the signature piece of legislation in Donald Trump's presidency. Because what we're talking about, this one big beautiful bill, process-wise, we're doing it in order to get a majority vote in the House and a simple majority in the Senate, not 60 votes, but 51 through a process called reconciliation.
Okay.
So as we're working on this bill, and we've had some procedural votes, not only in the House, but in the Senate to set us up, we're talking about significant tax legislation that I'm working on, a tax reform, building on what we did in 2017. We're talking about President Trump's border policy, President Trump's energy policy, maybe some ag policy, all in one big, beautiful bill.
Okay.
One vote. And so on the House Ways and Means Committee, which I'm honored to serve on, obviously we've got jurisdiction over tax. So I'll remind you that in 2017, we passed something called the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. We lowered the individual rates on everybody. We condensed the brackets. We doubled the standard deduction so that in our part of Tennessee, about 90% of the people who file taxes do not have to itemize. They can take that standard deduction. We doubled the estate tax exemption so that most people, when their loved ones pass away, don't have to worry about paying estate taxes, selling the family farm, selling the small business. We did a lot of good things. We gave a 20% deduction for small business. But Steve, if we don't do anything before the end of this year, 2025, all those provisions would go away. They would revert back to where they were prior to 2017. And so my argument is the one reason that the economy was so great and red hot during the Trump years was because of what we did with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So if we don't do anything, I think it'd be devastating for the economy. And so on this big reconciliation bill, this tax part is going to be a major part of that bill.
Okay. What is the advantage of putting all these different elements together in one bill?
Well, a number of things. One is it really makes it simpler when you think about in the Senate, for example, having to get 60 votes for cloture,
All right, okay.
which is that's a little wonky,
yeah.
right? It is 51. So with reconciliation, you can do it once or twice per year. And Speaker Johnson, Leader Thune, who's the majority leader in the Senate, President Trump got together. I advocated for one bill. Let's do all of the president's initiatives in one bill. Now, you know, you and I in the past have talked about when Pelosi, for example, when she was Speaker, would put together these huge bills. And I'd literally get it on a Tuesday night at 7 p.m. and then be told we're voting on it the next day at noon. That's not what we're talking about here. It'll be a large, comprehensive bill that will, in my opinion, will affect Americans positively. But we're going to have enough time, everybody, to go through it and figure out from a constituent standpoint what you're satisfied with, what you may not like, and in the end have that debate and ultimately have that vote.
Is 2025 the open window here, or is there a point somewhere along in this year that it's got to be done?
We could do it. We could do it in 2025 and even later. But you know, my experience is, and I think people watching understand, the longer it goes and the later it goes, especially into the political cycle, then those things get harder.
Okay, all right.
And I will say this: when we passed this big tax bill that lowered everybody's taxes in 2017, we did it late December. It was a few days before Christmas. I don't think people really saw the economic benefit of it until later in 2018 and 19. So one important reason to do it now rather than later is uncertainty, which I'm hearing that word a lot now. People need to be able, they need to know how to plan. Small business needs to know whether they can allocate capital or not allocate capital. Frankly, medium and large businesses need to know what they can do and what's going to be expected after January 1. If we run up to the deadline to the end of the year, right before these provisions expire, I think it'd be really chaotic for businesses, for individuals, and most certainly for the economy.
Are there certain elements in this we need to look at where there's dissent out there that maybe could trip this thing up, or?
Well, there are a lot of things, and I will tell you that from a policy standpoint, I'm looking on the committee, Ways and Means Committee, what worked in 2017, what we need to renew, what we extend out for X number of years, what we may make permanent. But I'll give you a few examples. President Trump last year in the campaign talked about wanting to not have tax on tips.
Okay.
Well, that's become a big issue. That's something that I'm looking at. He also talked about no tax on overtime. I'm looking at that. Then you got to look at, well, what if you do this, what is the cost?
Okay, revenue.
And so we're getting different scores.
Okay.
And then what are some of the different ways you pay for some of these cuts?
Okay.
In the end, we want our economy to advance. We want people to be able to advance. I've talked a couple of times about small business. One thing we did in 2017, we gave small business a 20% deduction. That's huge. I mean, I can't tell you the number of small businesses that have come either to meet with me in Washington. I met with them in West Tennessee. They've come to testify. And they say, you know, that's literally the difference between me being able to provide health insurance for my employees or not.
Hang on to that thought. Congressman David Kustoff is with us. We'll continue this dialogue right here at E+ TV 6.
Every child follows a path in life. For many, that path will lead them to a door that gives them a place to grow, to learn, to belong. place to forge their future. Because while many doors open, these doors transform. They did for us. Support your local boys and girls clubs. Great futures start here.
Or that the projections would be tornado next Thursday?
I can't do Thursday, but I can do Friday.
Disasters don't plan ahead. You can. Talk to your loved ones about how you're going to be ready in an emergency.
Eyes forward. Don't drive distracted.
Welcome back to Dialogue at E+ TV 6 as we continue a conversation with David Kustoff, who's a congressman for the 8th District in the state of Tennessee. You've been working on some specific bills. I want to talk about a few of those. What about jamming cell phones in prison?
It's a big issue.
Okay.
I tell you, I give a lot of credit to State Senator Ed Jackson, who talked to me about this issue a number of years ago.
That's right, because he's been on corrections for a long time. Yeah.
He has been. And so he talked to me and a few others. You got an issue not only in Tennessee in jails and prisons, but across the country where you have people literally behind bars who have access to contraband cell phones. Mm-hmm. And what they are doing behind bars, they shouldn't have a cell phone when you're in jail or in prison. They're using that to commit crimes. They're actually using it to order murders in different states. Mm. And so our argument is once you're behind bars for whatever reason, there's certain conveniences and amenities that you're not entitled to, including the use of a cell phone.
Yeah.
We've seen cell phones being snuck into jails and prisons. We've seen cell phones being dropped by literally by drones into prisons. And so the issue is, what can you do with it? Well, depends on the jail, depends on the prison. In some jails and prisons, nobody's allowed to have a cell phone, including the people who work there, guards, law enforcement. Some, they are, but the prisons or the jails knows that person's cell phone number. The technology exists to literally jam cell phones that are not lawful. In other words, if Joe Smith is in prison, he has a contraband cell phone, his number's not authorized, there is technology that you can jam that signal. So I've been working on this issue along with Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas. And a couple of weeks ago, we filed bills both in the United States Senate and in the United States House that would allow jails and prisons to jam these signals.
Okay.
And I think
what's been the response to it?
Well, from law enforcement and correction officials, they are very appreciative. In fact, I've had a number of law enforcement, prison officials who come to visit me who were with us when we introduced this legislation. They talk about the extreme need for it. When I talk about murders that have been ordered from people behind prison walls, that's not a one-off. That happens more than you would think.
Yeah. I have a friend from high school. Her son is in prison, unfortunately, and she was getting extorted. You know, if you don't send us this amount of money, we're going to hurt Michael.
Right.
And so, which I'm sure is way down the food chain, and you know, but I thought that's the power of all this, because she would get direct calls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you know, the issue is, should somebody behind the prison bars have that kind of power and that kind of authority?
Yeah. Right.
You and I think everybody else would argue no.
Is there an opposition to this?
Well, the opposition is mainly from some of the telephone companies that say, you know, we fundamentally agree with you, but we want to make sure that some innocent person's cell phone is not jammed. I get that.
Yeah.
But the technology exists. In other words, if somebody lives near a prison, but the technology exists where you can make these cell phones that are not authorized essentially a brick, non-usable. So part of my job is to educate not only my constituents and people around the country about what a problem this is, but also my colleagues. And I'm impressed that we've had a number of my colleagues who have joined in, who are co-sponsors of this legislation, and we look forward to ultimately getting a vote in the House of Representatives.
You also talking, Samantha was talking about swatting or something? What is this?
Swatting's a real problem. You're seeing this all around the country where law enforcement is being called, somebody calls 911, and it's a fake call. And the deployment of law enforcement, SWAT teams, swatting, is prevalent all around the country. If I can tell you, Steve, I got familiar with this. One of our constituents called me and said, look, my father and mother were swatted. So tell me what happened. So his parents are in their 80s. They are asleep, but there's a call that goes through at 911 at 1 in the morning, and the allegation is Mr. Jones is beating Mrs. Smith. Send law enforcement out there. The SWAT team goes out. And of course, they're in their pajamas, they're asleep. They don't know what's going on. It's a phony call. And not only is it a tremendous waste of resources for the police or the sheriff to send out all these men and women, but somebody's going to get hurt. Some officer erroneously...
So is the motive of this just pranking people, or is it sometimes as sinister?
It's both. Sometimes it is a prank. Sometimes it's somebody that is upset or angry with others. We've seen it happen to homes, to schools, to churches. We've seen gamers from different parts of the country get mad at another gamer at 2 in the morning.
So what do you do to stop this?
Well, I'm a former U.S. attorney, and I think the legislation that we've proposed, which would provide severe federal penalties if somebody's caught, if we can pass this and it happens, and U.S. attorney or federal prosecutor gets a hold of it and can prosecute it, I think it'll send a strong deterrent message across the country. Don't do this. It's not funny. You're not getting even with anybody. Don't do it, because if you do it and you get caught, you're going to go to federal prison for a long time.
Okay. One thing you've been working on is protection, at least initially for Supreme Court justices, because the last administration we saw a lot of protests out in front of Supreme Court justices' houses and other things. And now judicial decisions are, well, that person needs to be kicked out or whatever. There's pressure comes from both sides on the court system. So what's your concern here?
My concern is that we've seen Supreme Court justices not only have protests in front of their homes, but their lives are threatened because of decisions that they make. We started seeing it, well, it's gone on for a long time. We started seeing it really escalate after the Dobbs decision came out, which restricted Roe v. Wade.
That became part of an organized protest, right? Targeted special. I mean, let's go in front of the judge's house and or the justice.
Threaten them, threaten their families. So Senator Marsha Blackburn in the Senate has worked on a similar bill to the bill that I've worked on in the House to give teeth to the fact that if you threaten a justice, you threaten him or her with bodily injury, it doesn't matter whether they were appointed or nominated by a Republican president or Democrat president or what they've decided on. If you do that, you're going to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
Okay.
And so I look forward to working with my colleagues in the House of Representatives to get this passed. This should be bipartisan because it's affecting judges of all stripes.
All stripes, it certainly is. 3 branches of government for a reason, right?
That's right.
For a reason. All right. Congressman David Kustoff is with us. We'll continue this dialogue in just a moment right here on E+ TV6.
What this place needs is better graduation rates.
What this place needs is less childhood obesity.
What this place needs is free help with taxes.
What this place needs is healthy breakfast.
What this place needs is fitness programs for kids.
What this place needs is early readers.
What this place needs is mentors for teens.
What this place needs is people to join us. What this place needs is you. To donate or volunteer, go to unitedway.org.
Welcome back to Dialogue at E+ TV 6. Congressman David Kustoff of the 8th District in Tennessee is with us. I know you're a supporter of the president and are enthusiastic about his election. The first 100 days, it may look wonderful. It looks like a bronc and buck ride to me sometimes. And so how are we doing this first 100 days?
You know, Donald Trump is doing exactly what he campaigned on, and that is to shake up Washington, D.C. It's really less than 100 days, believe it or not, that he's been in office.
We're going to play this for a few weeks. So.
Yeah. Well, so I look at what he's done, and there's news broken every day, multiple times a day.
It seems like forever to some. It seems like forever to some, Congressman.
But to think about things differently, you know, a lot of wasteful spending in Washington, a lot of fraud and abuse. And to appoint Elon Musk and really a team of really smart folks to go through these various agencies and departments and try to identify where that fraud and where that waste has been occurring. The bloating of payroll, for instance, at HHS over the last couple of years under President Biden, we've seen a list of just crazy spending that I don't care what political party you belong to, it just doesn't make any sense to anybody. So I applaud President Trump on trying to get a hold of the federal spending. In Congress, we're working with him as part of this one big beautiful bill that I was talking to you about a moment ago to look at other ways to cut wasteful spending. You know, with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we have seen the revenues continue to increase. Even though we cut taxes, the revenues have increased going back to 2017 and 18, but the spending has increased dramatically. Yeah. And we've got to get a hold on it.
Is that going to be the key in addressing this tremendous deficit that we're carrying?
It's got to be, because you know, you mentioned the deficit. The debt is significant. I mean, the debt is almost $37 trillion.
Yeah.
And Steve, when you look at all the expenditures, the amount of money that we have to pay on that debt service is almost equal now to what we do to fund the Department of Defense. Yeah. And that is way out of line and way out of whack. And you look at the debt and you look at who holds that debt. That really is kind of a national security issue when you think about the Chinese and other foreign interests that hold our debt.
Yeah. Okay. Will this be the key, I guess, in doing, because you have to go where the money is. Of course, some are saying the Department of Defense is a big one, but then they get to Social Security, Medicare, which frightens people. And Medicaid, that frightens people when you start talking about making changes there. What can be done?
I think you've got to look at everything in totality. You've got, when you look at all of federal spending, and you look at Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, that makes up almost 2/3 of all federal spending. And I don't vote on that. Nobody in Congress votes on that. That's on autopilot. Mm-hmm. I'm essentially, every year when I vote on appropriations, I'm voting on about 1/3 of all federal spending. So I think that, you know, in the next few years, we've got to be serious about it.
But you would have the power to legislatively change it, right? I mean,
we have the power to change
age or whatever.
Well, you know, I'll give you a perfect example. Social Security is something that we've got to deal with, because right now, the way it's being funded and the money that's going out, if we as a nation don't do anything by about 2033, which is not that far away, every Social Security recipient is going to see a haircut of about 25 cents on the dollar. And that's important. So we've got to think about what can we do to save Social Security so that the people who are not retired now but will be retired in 8 or 10 years will get Social Security. Those who are currently on it in a few years will get their full benefits. I think it's really important. These are good things, but when Franklin Roosevelt authored Social Security in the 1930s, people didn't live as long then as they do today.
Now, yeah.
I'm glad people live a long time today, or living longer.
But the age should be able to be adjusted, I would think, right? To reflect that.
I think
that would
everything-
seem reasoned, but I know that people are very much against it.
You know, you got to look at everything in totality. Another thing that's changed, though, going back 90 years to Roosevelt, is back in that day, you had almost 5 workers paying into Social Security for one retiree. Today, that number is down from 5 people paying in for one retiree to about 2 to 3.
Okay.
So we need to be thoughtful. I would say that you look to history for examples. Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill faced a similar scenario back in the early 1980s. And they crafted a solution that was hard. But when they did it, they wanted to work on a horizon that would go out about 70 years, 80 years. In the end, it'll last about 50 years, which is pretty doggone good. Yeah. Whatever we do, we need to think long-term and not cheap and short-term.
Well, I think Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton balanced budgets. You know the political environment there. You've been long enough to see this now. Is that possible anymore? Can you get that kind of bipartisan discussion any longer to say, hey, this is a problem bigger than us and we need to address this?
Well, I'd like to think so. You know, the problem is I talked about the spending. Spending's been a problem for a long time, but during those first 2 years of Biden, it really exploded. I voted against a lot of big bills that was brand new first-time money, and we didn't need to do that. And when you look at those votes, those were pretty much party line votes where the Democrats were voting for these big spending bills like the American Rescue Plan, like the Inflation Reduction Act, which is not very aptly named because it exasperated inflation to the tune of trillions of dollars of brand new money. Now, we're X number of years past Biden. Are there some right-minded Democrats that would take a hard, serious look? I'd like to think so and hope so, but the proof is in the pudding.
Okay. You optimistic?
I'm always optimistic about this nation.
Okay.
And when I'm in Washington and I'm thinking about a lot of these really difficult issues and problems, I think about the people who served before me, the men and women, going back to our nation, the beginning of our nation's founding, who faced a lot of difficult issues going back in our nation's history, and we've always survived and always come out on top. We'll continue to do that, but we just need people to do the right thing with good, strong leadership.
Okay. You see that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with President Trump and with his initiative. I think we've got strong leaders on the Republican side in the House of Representatives, but there are tough times, and we're going to make some really difficult decisions.
Next time we come back, we'll settle all the foreign policy issues. How's that?
That sounds like a good deal.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Steve.
Always appreciate the time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for being with us. Our appreciation to Congressman David Kustoff for being with us, and thank you for sharing this time. Stay with us here at E+ TV 6 because this is the place where the dialogue continues.